Welcome to the deep dive. We sort through all that noise out there to bring you some clarity, maybe some surprising insights too.
Yeah,
And today we're looking at a really key moment. I mean, it's high stakes international diplomacy, but also, let's be honest, a lot of political theater.
definitely. A fascinating mix.
So, okay, what's the focus for this deep dive? We've been looking at reports detailing Donald Trump's joint press conference with Keir Starmer. This was during Trump's second state visit to Britain.
Right.
The sources, they're calling it fiery, unpredictable. Sounds about right, maybe.
Yeah.
But our job is to kind of peel back those layers.
Exactly. And for you listening, our mission really is to get past just the headlines.
Yeah.
We want to grasp the key things, the shifts and maybe how they're talking and what it all means right now.
Right, the implications.
Yeah, implications for U.S.-UK ties, but also the bigger geopolitical picture. What's really compelling about this one press conference is how it gives you this kind of concentrated look. It's into diplomatic strategy, political personas, that whole art of communication, really, on the world stage. It's about digging into what's actually behind the words.
And what makes this one so interesting, I think, is just how unexpected it all was. You've got this like dramatic public telling off of a major world leader,
Right.
followed almost immediately by really lavish praise for another country. And then mixed in those classic provocative asides that, always get attention. So as we go through this, maybe ask yourself, okay, beyond the shock, what do these things, these statements that seem all over the place, what do they really tell us about the people involved and the game they're playing?
Good question.
Okay, let's dive right in. Probably biggest headline grabber, the most astonishing part of this whole press conference, Donald Trump directly, and I mean forcefully, condemning Vladimir Putin. Right there at Chequers.
Yeah, that was something.
It wasn't subtle diplomatic language, was it? It felt like a straight-up accusation.
Not at all subtle, no.
Trump said, and you could almost hear the personal disappointment, that Putin had let him down. He explained he'd gone into office thinking he could swiftly broker a peace deal between Moscow and Kyiv. But Putin's actions stopped that. The language felt really personal, didn't it? Like a broken trust.
Very personal.
It just felt so different from what we've heard from him before on this. That's what stood out.
And that's really where the core insight is, I think. What's fascinating, like you said, is just how specific and blunt Trump's criticism was. He actually said, quote, he's killing many people and he's losing more people than he's killing.
Wow.
The Russian soldiers are being killed at a higher rate than the Ukrainian soldiers. Now, if you followed Trump's statements on this before, this was a huge shift, a really dramatic one.
Yeah.
He often blamed, Zelensky or Biden for the war or sounded more neutral. But here, the blame was direct, personal, public, right on Putin. The insight here is how Trump often makes these huge geopolitical issues intensely personal. It turns traditional diplomacy into this measure of perceived personal respect.
Which can be tricky.
Very tricky, especially for allies who prefer, stable institutions over individual relationships.
Okay, so connect that to the bigger picture for us.
Well, his reason for why Putin did it is just as revealing. He said Putin would have never done what he did except that he didn't respect the leadership of the United States.
Ah, okay. So it comes back to respect for the U.S. leader.
Exactly. It frames this massive international conflict not as, some complex geopolitical thing with history and interests, but mainly as one leader failing to get enough personal respect from another. And that has big implications for how foreign policy might work, right? Suggest personal relationships, perceived strength, might trump alliances or strategy. It's like a foreign policy based on who respects who personally.
You can just imagine the reaction on the British side. Our sources say this really striking condemnation. It delighted British officials. They were keen to use Trump's visit to isolate Russia.
Makes sense.
And Starmer, who apparently had been pushing Trump privately about sanctions, said publicly something like, it's only when the president has put pressure on Putin that he's actually shown any inclination to move.
Right. That's a strong endorsement from the host.
Yeah, quite a statement. But, and this is a really important but, even though Starmer was pushing for tougher sanctions, Trump didn't commit to any new ones. He stopped short. No concrete promises on escalating economic pressure. So the words were strong, but the policy action, not so much.
Indeed. And instead, he suggested something different. He argued that just cutting off Russian oil revenues would force Putin to drop out of that war.
So a different strategy entirely.
Yeah, completely different way of thinking, yeah. Between the two leaders on how you actually pressure Moscow. Starmer's team wanted that pledge for more traditional sanctions. Trump offered this alternative: squeeze the money supply directly.
Right, the oil revenue.
Exactly. So this raises a question, doesn't it, for you listening? Downing Street called this rebuke of the Kremlin maybe the visit's biggest diplomatic win.
Mm-hmm.
But how much does a rhetorical win, words alone, achieve if there's no solid policy behind it? Does just saying it, even really forcefully, actually change the diplomatic reality? Or is it mostly just good PR for the host?
Interesting point. Okay, let's completely switch gears now. From that global tension, that diplomatic chess game, let's look at the U.S.-UK relationship itself.
Okay.
Because here, it was a totally different vibe almost. Despite those tensions we just talked about, Trump was actually full of praise, like lavish praise, for Britain during the visit.
Yeah, quite the contrast.
He really piled on the compliments, praising the royal family after the Windsor Castle banquet,
Mm-hmm.
calling the UK the Magnificent Isles. He even stopped to compliment the Red Devil parachute team there at Chequers.
Right.
And he specifically mentioned King Charles and Queen Camilla, two fantastic people, he called them, and said, "We're grateful beyond words for the spectacular honor of the state visit." You know, the whole 9 yards, diplomatic warmth.
And if we connect that to the bigger picture, well, this mix of pomp, the pageantry, it's standard for state visits, sure.
Yeah, it's part of the deal.
But it serves a real strategic purpose. It kind of frames the whole relationship positively, acts like a diplomatic cushion, maybe, even when there are disagreements simmering underneath.
Like a smoothing balm.
Exactly. It reinforces that idea of the special relationship, lets the diplomatic theater happen, while still projecting this image of, strong ties. The insight is that the ceremonies, they aren't just fluff, they're tools. Managing perceptions, keeping up that sense of unity, even when the policy stuff gets messy.
Right, like setting the stage with a positive overture before the tricky bits. But of course, the performance wasn't always perfectly scripted.
No.
The reports mention several awkward moments with Starmer during that press conference, which was, as they described it, wide-ranging and characteristically unpredictable. 90 minutes long.
Mm-hmm. Long time for things to go off script.
You could almost feel the awkwardness jump off the page sometimes. And these weren't small things, were they? These were real points of disagreement.
No, quite significant.
Like Trump briefly saying he disagreed with Starmer recognizing Palestinian statehood. That's a major foreign policy difference right out in the open.
Huge difference, yeah.
Then he went further. He suggested using the UK military to deal with small boat migration.
Wow.
Quoting him, he said, "I told the Prime Minister I would stop it. It doesn't matter if you call it the military. It destroys countries from within."
Offering domestic policy advice, essentially.
Pretty much. And then to top it off, he just kind of brushed off questions about the free speech climate in Britain, which was a really hot topic there domestically.
That dynamic in a joint press conference, it's pretty extraordinary, isn't it?
It really is.
You have the guest leader openly disagreeing with the host. On foreign policy, okay, but then suggesting solutions for a really sensitive domestic issue like migration, that's usually off limits.
Very unusual.
It tells you so much about Trump's communication style,
Yeah.
right? That willingness to just break protocol, say what he thinks, forget the niceties. But the insight for you listening is how tough that makes it for the host leader, for Starmer. He's got to manage these public disagreements, which could look like his authority is being undermined.
Right, on his own turf.
Exactly. While still trying to keep up the appearance of a successful state visit. That facade of unity, even when it's obviously strained. It's a real tightrope walk.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, what message does that send to other allies when a former U.S. president just openly gives unsolicited, maybe controversial advice on how to run your country?
Yeah, good point. So this is where it gets, I think, really interesting. Because beyond the formal stuff, the policy, the managed moments, this press conference was just soaked in Trump's, unique communication style.
Trademark Trump.
The report called it typical Trump fashion, full of those unpredictable comments, the asides. And those are the bits that almost always end up in the headlines, aren't they? They define how people remember it.
They really do steal the show often.
And there were some classics here. He just casually called wind power a very expensive joke.
Yeah.
He gave his opinion on U.S. TV host Jimmy Kimmel, not a talented person.
Right.
And naturally, he took a swing at Joe Biden, saying he was never the brightest bulb in the ceiling. Just sprinkled these comments throughout the 90 minutes.
What's fascinating about those comments, which seem totally unrelated,
Random.
is how strategically They really add to the overall impression, the message of the whole event. They might seem off-topic, maybe even spontaneous, but they're very much part of that communication style. For a lot of people, it reinforces that persona. Direct, not afraid to speak his mind, always driving a narrative.
Yeah.
It fits perfectly with that pomp, provocation, and plenty of theater description from the source material. The insight is that these asides, in their own way, can be just as powerful, maybe even more powerful, than the official policy statements. They shape how the public sees it, they dominate the news cycle, and they constantly set the speaker apart from, more traditional politicians. They're not just noise, they're part of the brand.
So if we pull all these threads together,
Yeah.
the Putin rebuke, the praise for the UK, the awkward bits with Starmer, the random asides, what's the overall takeaway?
Well, it's definitely layered. Depends on who you ask, right? For Downing Street, like we said, that public condemnation of Putin, even without the sanctions commitment, that was clearly framed as a big diplomatic win.
Right. They could spin it that way.
It let them present the visit as a success in isolating Russia.
Okay. And for Trump?
Well, the reports suggest it was, classic Trump playbook. Another chance to just dominate global headlines.
Yeah.
Mixing that high-level ceremony, the pomp, with provocative statements, lots of theater, all designed for maximum attention, it worked for his brand.
Served his purpose.
Absolutely. So what does this all mean for you listening to this, trying to make sense of today's world? It really pushes us to think hard about how public statements, personal styles, even those little offhand comments, how they all intersect with and sometimes even define big strategic diplomatic goals. The insight is that maybe now more than ever, these carefully planned state visits are also stages for political theater. Every word, every gesture gets picked apart for what it means domestically and internationally.
Right.
It makes you ask, are we watching real diplomacy? Or is it mostly a performance aimed at political goals?
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've really unpacked a lot here. That surprising Putin rebuke, the contrast with the lavish praise for the UK, those points of tension with Starmer, and of course the unforgettable characteristic asides that just took over the headlines.
Yeah, it really hammers home how one single event, planned down to the minute for a state visit, can also be incredibly unpredictable. And it reveals all these complex, sometimes contradictory layers in international relations, in political messaging. It goes way beyond just simple agreements or disagreements. The performance, in a lot of ways, is the message.
Exactly. So maybe the final thought for you to chew on is this. In this age we live in, constant information, everything connected globally, how do leaders actually balance their personal brand, their political strategy, with that very delicate, often contradictory dance of international diplomacy?
The balancing act.
Yeah. And what's the real lasting impact of these incredibly theatrical moments? On alliances, on policy, on how we all see things long after the cameras are gone. Something to think about.
Definitely something to ponder.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.